viewers, welcome back to the Frontier Shed. My name's Kent. We've got an old router tabletop that I built a couple of years ago, and it served me well. I got the idea from another Instructable along the way, where it allowed me to build a rather portable tabletop and clamp it into a Workmate. However, this Workmate's being retired to the welding shop, and this profile doesn't quite fit into the new Workmate. The jaws don't open up wide enough. So we're going to make a modification for that. Secondly, the insert that I used, I made out of 1/4-inch plywood. And I noticed on occasion, when pushing material through, that there's some deflection here. That hasn't been acceptable on some of my finer works. So I've got this new ROK table insert that I want to use. So it doesn't quite fit the same profile, and we're going to have to make a couple of changes here. I'm not sure which way we're going to go, but we'll figure something out. Incidentally, this is a Craig router fence that I got local hardware, and set it up on my table. I really like this. The adjustments are very true, and it has a vacuum port accessory here so that I can hook it up to my filtration system. Really happy overall with the design. So setting this up on the new Workmate is going to be a must. Let's see how it goes. So this is the newer Workmate, and as I mentioned, the jaws just don't open wide enough to accommodate this underframe here. So my new idea is to just take this panel off completely, use some form of an anchoring system in this slot so that we can get a very secure mount, and take advantage of the existing mounts that are on the Workmate frame. We don't need the cross piece. There's lots of strength here for that. Gives lots of room for the motor down below. So I kind of think that's the direction we're headed. I've got a strip that I'm going to tuck under here, and then I'll attach a 1-inch thickness. Now I've already measured that this Workmate has 3 1/4 inches of travel in the adjustment jaws. So by setting this over top of these 2 holes, hang a bolt in there in the bottom of this strip, and as we clamp the panel in, it's going to lock in place. So it's going to make very easy fixturing moving forward when we want to use the router. Take the back support rail off and drop the table in place, clamp it down, and we're done. Okay, I've cranked the jaw adjustment forward 1.5 inches or so, and we've got a really good bite on this front slot to the blocks that we put on. So we're going to mark these. The locking screw in. Well, that's job one done. That worked out as good as can be expected. So number two, let's install the router table insert. And you can see there's a bit of a gap at the top edge, and yet the width is tight. With the router table properly mounted to the Workmate now, I just set up the fence and put a board across the vacuum slot and set up a router bit. So we're going to walk along this line and cut a depth in here for the new insert. As you probably noticed, I opened this up a little bit to square it off because it already was a little bit too long, but I had cut this first one with the jigsaw and it wasn't very straight. So square that up with the router. Now I've got a piece I'm going to slip in here, glue in place, and then we'll route that lip again so that that drops down into place. I've got the insert plate fitting really nicely now, and yeah, we had to install a shim across the back here because it was a different hole size, but that's okay. We weren't going to rebuild this whole table. This works just fine. All we have to do now is insert the plate on the router. I've got the mounting hole locations marked. We'll be using these factory screws. I'm going to drill with a 3/8 brad point bit to countersink the heads, only about 1/8 of an inch or so, just enough so the heads remain below the surface of the router plate.
Well, I'm pretty happy with this router plate fit. Pops in and out of there very easily. It's good cord management. Access to the switch. Perfect. The main objective of this project was to modify the router table so that it would fit securely into the metal frame of the Workmate. Very simple, couple of screws that lock into the slots on the front of the Workmate. Slip it into place, crank it down. Now there's one thing I noticed that I think we're going to want to fix here. Even when we're clamped in fairly snug, it's possible to pull the back end of this table free. For instance, when you're moving the Workmate around, if you pick up the whole thing from the tabletop, and sometimes that's desirable, you want to move it somewhere else in the shop, you can't have it coming free.
See that groove in here? There's a groove on the edge of the Workmate clamp, and that doesn't leave a whole lot of area here for gripping the tabletop. So we're going to drive a couple screws in there, cut the heads off, leave a little bit extending that rides into this groove, and that'll give an adequate clamping force that's less likely for the tabletop to pull free. So let's get that going.
Now you can see the studs that we installed on the bottom edge of this router table. They fit nicely down in the groove on the Workmate clamp. Look at this, nice and solid. There you have it. I'm really happy with the router table modification. Now we can get on with the next job, and that's modifying the drill press table.